Hello and welcome to the Gaggle Challenge, and if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle, and we have a welcome return of a frequent guest of the Gaggle, Hans Mahncke, whose expertise in all manners legal is equal to his mastery of the details of very, very esoteric subjects. So we're always very fortunate when Hans is here to explain minutiae of all sorts of cases. And the case right now, which we want to talk about, and we touched on it in a recent podcast, is the case of Alexander Smirnov, who was a longtime confidential human source of the FBI, who briefed his FBI handler back in 2020 and told them about a conversation that he had had with the head of Burisma, Zlochevsky, and Zlochevsky supposedly said, "Oh, I pay $5 million to President Biden and $5 million to Hunter." This was then written up in an FBI memo, and when the Republicans in their impeachment investigation got their hands on this memo, then there was a lot of excitement about it. And now suddenly, this is a couple of months later, the FBI has turned on its confidential human source, said, and brought criminal charges against him, charged him with making false statements. And naturally, the Democrats and the media are, whooping it up with joy. And, they've got the smoking gun. So, yeah, Putin is back to his old tricks. He's trying to interfere in the American election process. He's obviously siding with Trump against Biden. He's helping to put out this fake, phony, baloney story about Biden with this liar. So anyway, that's a sort of, for anyone who's not up to date, could you fill in the details? Because what has happened is, just he was arrested. Then the government wanted to keep him locked up. The magistrate judge in Nevada disagreed, released him on bail, and then he was rearrested, particularly when he was actually talking to his attorney. So right now he's back in custody. So it's all kind of strange. Can you fill us in at what's really going on here, Hans?
Yeah, sure. And you're absolutely right. It's an absolutely crazy story. And there's things happening that even out of Biden's Department of Justice, you would not expect that kind of behavior. And here we are. So first of all, as you say, this guy, U.S. citizen, longtime FBI informant, all his reports are clean. We've seen some of these reports from his handler, no issues, no deception, everything fine, 14 years. And then on Valentine's Day, he shows up in Las Vegas, where he lives. He was coming in on a flight, and he got arrested by, this is David Weiss's outfit. And we'll come back to that in a moment, because David Weiss, of course, is the guy who's prosecuting Hunter for his tax crimes. The reason why I say we'll come back to that in a moment is because why is David Weiss doing this? This is a bit strange, because he should have farmed it out to just DOJ. It's not really a special counsel issue. Anyway, leave that aside. So guy comes in, he's arrested, and they put him in jail. He hires a fantastic lawyer. By the way, just as a quick aside here, when you look at some of this Trump stuff and some of their lawyers over there, and just over the past week, compare that to this lawyer, the Smirnov one. Oh my goodness, it's like night and day. The Smirnov, fantastic lawyer, goes in and tells the judge, no, this, and this, didn't lie, not a flight risk, on and on. I mean, just the whole works. And the judge completely agrees with him. And DOJ goes ballistic. No, you can't release him. RussiaGate and whatever. He'll go to Russia and he'll destroy the 2024 election, and just absolutely hysterical filings. I've never seen anything that like hysterical, even on a DOJ scale. Anyway, judge said, I don't care, let him go. And this was, I think, on, this week, like on Wednesday or so, I think Wednesday. And then the day after, the DOJ comes back, Wise's outfit comes back and rearrests him, as you say, in his lawyer's office. And as of right now, he's in jail. So his lawyer is now been filing all kinds of emergency motions and so on to try and get him out again.
What is the charge?
Well, this is you're absolutely right. I mean, this is just crazy. Same charges, same everything, even the same indictment. They've rearrested him on the same indictment for which he's already been bailed on. It's total madness.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay.
Yeah. So, but
we went through the affidavit, okay, and there were so many questions, and I was dealing with it cold. George was introducing it to me, but the Smirnov, it is claimed that he had high-level conversations with people in Ukraine, Burisma, for example, but it's not clear at all. As a matter of fact, it's opaque. What is the predicate of him being able to make these telephone calls to high-level people? I mean, is he like, is his cover an IT company? Is his cover oil distribution? I work with distilleries. What is it? Because it was never mentioned. I mean, it just sounds very strange to me that, these telephone conversations, and if he's involved in a telephone conversation with a high-level official and outright corruption is being mentioned, don't you think the person on the receiving end would say, yeah, but the European Union has been looking at me for years. I have enemies in the Ukrainian government, and the person that he's talking to just freely talks about these things on an open line. I mean, that's just the tip of the iceberg. That's what I remember from our conversation with George.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, let's break this down. It is not clear what he was or pretended to be. I mean, the most sort of obvious one is perhaps sort of business consultant or something like that. Business consultant who happens to speak Ukrainian and Russian and English and, has contacts or whatever. I think it's also very important to note that the FBI was paying him to go there and talk to these people. It was his job, including intelligence officials. So now for Wise to say, oh, he spoke to intelligence officials in Russia. Well, you sent him over there to do that. The other thing is they sent him at various places. It's not just Ukraine. We don't know the full spectrum. We just know they sent him on a lot of trips. And now Wise is complaining he's a flight risk because he goes on trips all the time. So just to kind of illustrate the problem there. Now, coming back to what is he alleged to have done and how does that tie in with his role and so on. So he was supposed to go to places like Ukraine and find out stuff and then come back and report. That was his job. And the allegation is that he misreported something that he was told by the head of Burisma's board, Vadim Pojarsky. Another person who was in attendance was Mykola Zlochevsky's daughter. She was there as well. So they're supposed to have met. And they supposedly said or bragged about this Biden will take care of our issues. The reason why that came up is because Smirnov was supposed to help Burisma in the U.S. With a reverse takeover of a U.S. company. Right. So everything needed to look clean, and having this kind of stench is no good. And allegedly, Smirnov was told, don't worry about it. Biden's son will take care of it, something to that effect. And then as a follow-on, he allegedly heard that a bribe was paid in order to make sure that Biden would take care of it. Okay, so that's the broad outline. Now, you can never prove whether that was said or not, because if you have an informant and they go to some other country and come back and say, oh, I was told that, well, that's it. Okay.
Well, that's what we talked about the other day, which is, well, how do they know this is not true? And the best that they come up with is says, oh, well, he says that this was happened in 2015, 2016. It actually happened in 2017. And by that time, Biden was already no longer in office. And therefore, Biden had no longer any influence. And therefore, it couldn't have happened. I mean, it's completely baffling. I mean, the guy had been vice president for 8 years. He'd been a six-term U.S. senator. He was going to run for president. He was still a very important and influential figure. And I don't know, how do they know? I mean, anyone can get confused. Oh, yeah, well, this was 2015 or 2016, 2017. Everyone gets confused about when something...
Or did he just read a few articles from Politico?
Exactly. So I just don't understand how they know that this is a lie.
I think it's even worse. You're absolutely right. And that's the same question I think, many of us had when we looked at this indictment, that it just... it was extremely weak. It was, I would say, pathetic in terms of, he supposedly said late 2015 or 2016. So that means Smirnov himself was off by a year. By his own admission, he couldn't remember within a year.
Right.
Like, that's a pretty big time period. So to then say, oh, he said late 2016, but actually it was March 2017. You know, it just sort of, it just didn't fly. But our friend Steve McIntyre has now kind of solved this in a way that just you know, past few hours, he did some amazing kind of digging, and where probably Smirnov didn't lie at all, and it's all because of Wise just getting his timing screwed up. And here's the reason: the hook that Wise uses to pinpoint these times is that at some point Smirnov told his handler, I met Pojarski and the Burisma people at the time when Biden talked about firing the prosecutor. That's supposedly what he told his handler.
That was
So
that was 2018, right? I think when he
well, no. This is we don't know. So this is just like, this is kind of a game of you know, a riddle we have to solve. So the riddle is the informant Smirnov comes and tells you, yeah, I met Burisma's people, well, met several times, and at this meeting, this is the meeting where he was supposedly told about these bribes. That was around the same time when Biden talked about firing the prosecutor. Now, when you go into the indictment, Wise assumes that his entire indictment is built on the assumption that Smirnov must have meant December 9th, 2015, which is when Biden went to the Rada in Kiev and for the first time talked about reforming. I don't think he mentioned Shokin by name, but that's when he kind of pulled the trigger, like, you know, you need to get rid of this guy. But as you just said, George, is a much more parsimonious explanation, which is that Smirnov he's not into the weeds where he knows what happened on December 9th, 2015. But he remembers the video, the Council of Foreign Relations, the Biden, the son of a gun video, you know, fired a prosecutor.
Right.
And that was in 2018.
Right.
So if Smirnov didn't mean 2015, as Wise alleges, but if Smirnov meant 2018, yeah, like you said, George, then suddenly all the timing fits, everything works. So you know, we can't prove it yet, but it looks like, and again, huge hat tip to Steve McIntyre here for figuring this out. It looks like Wise just totally screwed up his timeline.
Right. But what about the $5 million part? That he just simply says, well, that's what I was told. He didn't say, oh, he got the $5 million bribe. He said, I was told that he paid the $5 million bribe. I mean, you can't say, well, he's lying, because how do we know that what Zlochevsky had told him?
Right. And the reason why we got into this whole timing, or why Wise had to get into this whole timing, is because, as you say, he cannot prove what Smirnov was or was not told. So he wants to do it indirectly by saying, well, you couldn't have been told that because the timing doesn't work. Well, as we just saw, the timing, you know, probably does work. So then you're only left with, was it said or was it not said? And it's impossible to prove. Now, to be honest, just, you know, my personal view is that Smirnov probably did embellish, or at least kind of he pounced, you know, to use a media word. Remember when Derkach came out with the Biden tapes in May and June of 2020? And by the way, I mean, those tapes are still to this day so incredibly explosive, and, you know, hardly anyone's ever reported on them. So Smirnov must have recognized how incredibly explosive this is. And, you know, my guess is he just wanted to kind of add a bit of oomph to the whole thing.
Right.
So next time when he met his handler, he was like, oh, you know, remember those tapes? Well, I also heard something. You know, remember when I met those guys, they also told me.
But people like Smirnov are paid to embellish, aren't they?
Right, exactly. So that's my assumption. And that he embellished, or, you know, because one of the questions, of course, is, well, if you were told about a bribe, and let's say it was 2018, why didn't you tell your handler then? Why did you wait until 2020 when Derkach came out? I mean, he could say, well, I thought they knew, or I didn't think it was that important, or it was just It was just hearsay. I don't have proof. It was just some guy in a coffee house who told me. You know, you can come up with all kinds of reasons why you didn't say, but just between us, you know, just it's sort of it looks a bit odd. And you know, I think Peter, you're right. He's paid to embellish. And when the Derkach thing came up, he was like, "Oh, now this is juicy. I'm going to tell my handler that he's going to be happy."
Well, I mean, what does Weiss want to prove? He's a double agent. I mean, what do they hope to gain here? Okay, because I mean, obviously he was being paid to snoop around. He was paid to talk to all these kinds of people to find out what they knew. So are they alleging that he was, you know, using this or passing on false information intentionally to confuse them, and he's actually working for the other side, or he works for the highest bidder? See, when George and I was going through, I mean, you have a legal mind and background. I was just left hanging all over the place. I don't understand what they want to really achieve here.
No, and neither do I. But I mean, we can just look at the facts and sort of come up with some guesses. I mean, the biggest problem is that this case wasn't brought much earlier. Why now? So that in itself is suspicious. Then, and now we come back to the point we mentioned earlier, why David Weiss? This should have been, even Mueller, when he came across like extraneous things, he would just pass them to DOJ, and then DOJ would either prosecute or not. And this is not, Weiss is supposed to deal with Hunter Biden and his tax problems, or, well, corruption. He let most of that go, but it's not really in his wheelhouse. So why him? It's almost as if someone told him to do that, maybe to atone for the fact that, you know, he deigned to charge Hunter for his taxes. You know, I'm just speculating here, but the why is a big question. The when, why now? That's a huge question. And then, and this to me is the most interesting one, is the narrative one. The initial indictment was not about narratives, not about Russian intelligence, not about any of those things. You know, when Peter, you ask, like, you know, what's the purpose? What was he a double agent or whatever? The initial indictment says none of those things. The initial indictment is only about one thing, which is Smirnov lied to us about these bribes. That's it. And then a few days afterwards, there was a supplemental filing from David Weiss, and all of a sudden he pulled the trigger on his RussiaGate 2.0. So in the supplemental filing, the term Russian intelligence is mentioned 19 times. Like, he had contact with Russian intelligence. Russian intelligence gave him this, that, and whatever. None of that is mentioned in the indictment. The indictment mentions Russian intelligence 0 times. So something happened where someone told Weiss, hey, that initial effort wasn't good enough. you gotta spice it up a bit. So he came up with this supplemental filing, and all of a sudden it's all about Russian intelligence. But by the way, it's just innuendo. Even unlike the media makes you think, oh, Russian intelligence passed disinformation, whatever. Even David Weiss is not saying that. He's not saying anything of the sort. He's just saying that Smirnov, as part of what he was doing, had contact with Russian intelligence. Russian intelligence spoke to him about this and that, but without specifying, you know.
Is that illegal?
That's his job. He was paid to go.
Yeah, that's my point. Okay.
Right.
And I think that they said something like Russian intelligence passed on some information about Hunter Biden. So that was it. I mean, I think they put something. They left it.
George, is worse than that. That one is one of the worst kind of media malpractice things I've seen in a long time. It says that, among other things, Russian intelligence once told him a story. A story. And by the way, I misstated that right now. Someone associated with Russian intelligence once told him a story about Hunter. So first of all, it's a story. You know, Hunter had ice cream or whatever. What did Hunter have for breakfast? And then associated with. So it could be someone's grandma. It could be so. Yeah. That sentence means nothing. As I said, it's just complete innuendo. But when you go further in that same filing, this is the supplemental filing, you find more of that innuendo, like just absolutely crazy stuff that David Weiss put in there. Like, if you let him out, he's going to swing the 2024 election for Trump. I mean, he doesn't mention Trump, but, you know, his preferred candidate, you know, words to that effect. There's no evidence of any kind for that. Then it says he's been peddling misinformation. No, the guy doesn't exist. Look for him online. The guy simply doesn't exist. He's an absolute ghost. No one's ever heard of him. He's never been out there. He's never published anything. He's just completely, incognito. The guy wasn't peddling anything. All he was doing was going to Ukraine, talking to people, coming back and saying whatever he heard. He
Right.
wasn't peddling anything. He wasn't. If he was spreading any misinformation, it was to one person. That was his FBI handler.
His handler.
And there was also this is the thing that I was a little puzzled about. They think, well, he was talking about some hotel in Kiev that is controlled by Russian intelligence, and they're eavesdropping on conversations, and with a view to creating the compromat. They use that word, the compromat, from Christopher Steele. And then they said, well, and they said, well, Hunter Biden was at this hotel, and he kept saying, oh, well, Hunter Biden was there, check up on Hunter Biden's conversations. And then the Weiss says triumphantly, no, because Hunter Biden has never been to Ukraine. He was collecting $1 million working for a Ukrainian energy company, but he's never been to Ukraine. So what did you make of that? That this hotel and where they eavesdrop, controlled by Russian intelligence and so on?
Just an embellished story, another one of those. I mean, it's not great in terms of, as you say, he was kind of caught but it's not necessarily a lie. If he was told by someone in Ukraine, oh, when Hunter Biden stayed here, he was in this room and they spied on him. So he just passes on that story. I wouldn't call that a lie, but it is, of course, it sounds all very, as you really kind of alluded to, Christopher Steele-like, where someone goes to Moscow, well, Kiev instead of Moscow, and then there's a hotel, and then they spy on you in the hotel room. And we've heard that story before. Right. He just thought he wanted to tell his handler something. After all, he gets sent over there. He has to come back. He has to say something.
Got to justify his paycheck.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the important thing. Yeah.
Yeah, but with this Smirnov character, obviously his name is about as Russian as it can get. Okay. Yep. Is he from Russia?
Not as far as, I mean, as I said, the guy is an absolute.
Well, I mean, that's my point. I mean, just because you have my last name is Lavelle. Okay, that has French origins. I have nothing to do with France other than I visited it a few times.
But they say he's an American and Israeli citizen.
Israeli.
There's no mention. There's no mention of his being a Russian citizen or anything, or Ukrainian citizen. He's just an Israeli citizen.
Right. We know he became an Israeli citizen in 1992. I think we know he's 43, so he would have been about 10 or so, 10, 11 when he became an Israeli citizen. And this is just I think from the indictment or one of the subsequent filings, because there's nothing online about this guy. This guy just doesn't exist. He's a ghost online. So, which, by the way, is a perfect, that's what an FBI informant should be, right? So this guy was about 10. He became an Israeli, so maybe he was even there before, in Israel before that. And apparently he came to the US in 2006 or somewhere around that. And then at some point he became a US citizen. So that's what we know about this guy. Where did he originate from before Israel? Who knows? But he might have been part of that, 1990, 91 diaspora, maybe out of the Soviet Republic of Ukraine, or who knows, but something like that.
Right. Yeah. No, that's it. But it is striking, the difference between the indictment and this, which is this affidavit, in support of keeping him detained, which is all about Russian intelligence this, and that, and that. And it was all really done in order to create this media buzz that the Republicans are colluding with Putin in order to do in Biden. And of course, all these, the familiar Republican congressmen, Schiff and the rest of them said, that's it. We've got him. This is what we always thought about the Republicans. They're working for Putin.
Okay, but also, what is to stop Smirnov to sing exactly what the prosecutors want, and for some kind of sweetheart deal? I mean, this guy is a professional. His profession is to embellish, to tell people what they want to hear. Do you think that it's possible that they could scare him enough that you're facing 25 in maximum security penal colony or something like that, or you could help us out. Do you see a scenario, something like that happening? Because look. Okay, he travels a lot. He has a Russian name. He may have Russian origins. He's been in and out of Ukraine. He's talked with Burisma and all that. I mean, for the mainstream media, he's got a really nice profile if you want to massage it, if you know what I mean.
Oh, absolutely. For some reason, David Wise and the Department of Justice are extremely concerned about him being out on bail. I mean, this rearresting him on the same charges for which he's already being bailed on is just unheard of. It's just incredible what happened there. So there's some level of desperation to not let this guy talk. And we don't know what and why. We've got a bit of info from the lawyer in terms of, first of all, the lawyer, Smirnov's lawyer, says we will fight this like hell, like really hard. And he lists a number of reasons why they're probably going to win. And even just on the basis of what we already discussed, he's got a much, much better case than any of these other people who got off, like Sussman, Danchenko, and so on in RussiaGate 1.0. For instance, this was funny. The lawyer said that Smirnov and his handler were like best friends, like personal friends, became friends. So a lot of their communication wasn't even on the FBI device. They just had a lot of chatting going on privately. So can you imagine what's in there in terms of Smirnov just kind of opening the kimono and say, this and that. They might have even talked about embellishing because it helped both of them. Who knows? I'm just kind of making it up here. But that is going to be absolutely terrible for Wise's case. Every time you have that where someone, no, I'm not going to use the FBI phone, I'm going to use my private phone. Oh, so much stuff is going to come out of that. Then, of course, we already had the timeline issue that, everything that Smirnov says seems to be true if you have the right timeline. So there's a very good chance he'll get acquitted. So if he gets some kind of deal, it would have to be a really, really good deal for him to accept that. I think maybe one of the reasons why they want to keep him incarcerated right now is because if he has to wait for a trial for a year, and by the way, the maximum for this offense is like 2 years or something. It's a really minor offense. It's like Papadopoulos lying to the FBI. Right. And Papadopoulos got 2 weeks because, of course, the 2 years is like the absolute maximum. So once you like, well, he's never done anything bad, no criminal record, no this, no that, and so on, then it gets bumped down to maybe a few weeks or none at all. And with that in mind, if he's going to be in jail for a year waiting for a trial where he's going to get 2 weeks, maybe he'll cut a deal. I'm just kind of thinking of possible reasons why they want to keep him in jail. But I completely agree with you. They absolutely want to make a deal with this guy. I mean, Wise and DOJ want to make a deal with this guy because if this goes to trial, it will be an absolute disaster for Democrats, for Biden, for the media, for the whole lot because of what we just said. After all, the guy is an insider. He did actually know all these Burisma people. He did sit with them many, many times. He did hear many stories. And all he has to do is he has to say that it's plausible that they told him about the Biden bribe. Well, even before this guy ever showed up on the scene, we knew about the Biden bribe. And we didn't know about any amounts or any specific bank transaction, but we knew Pojarski, Burisma told Hunter, get rid of this prosecutor. 2 weeks later, Joe Biden is over there getting rid of the prosecutor. So all of that will be kind of unraveled in court and it will be a total mess. So they really need to make this problem go away and they need Smirnov just to kind of plead guilty.
So what do you think Wise's game here is? Wise is just doing a favor for Biden? Yeah. That's all it is? He's helping out the Bidens?
I think so. I cannot come up with any good reason why Wise would have brought this charge. It's not, first of all, as we talked about, it's not his wheelhouse. He would have just passed it on. Second of all, as we just discussed, it just causes him huge problems. It's already causing him huge problems. He's doing all these filings trying to keep this guy locked up. No one knew this guy. This guy wasn't talking. This guy was an enigma. Wise would have just let it be that way. Everyone would have been happy. I don't think Wise is doing this on his own. It makes no sense. So someone told him, hey, you caused a lot of trouble for the Bidens. You need to do something nice. Or, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what goes on there behind the scenes. But another thing, George, is, you mentioned the supplemental filing about keeping him jailed, the one with all the Russian intelligence and so on. if you look at the language there, it's very different from the indictment and from previous filings. Just like the English, the sentences, the vocabulary, and so on. So of course, it appears someone else wrote that one, the one that pushes this whole Russia narrative.
Right. Yeah, I mean,
So
I wonder if we could. Oh, do you have another question? No, because I wanted to change subject now. I mean,
well, I mean, we can change subject, but is this RussiaGate 2.0?
If there is no trial, I think so, because then the narrative that is going to be entrenched and stick is that there's this guy, Russian name. I mean, this is a very important part of it. I think partly the reason why they chose this guy is because he has a Russian sounding name, which is, by the way, what they did with Sergei Milyan in RussiaGate 1.0. Total innocent guy. I'm not saying that Smirnov is innocent, but having a Russian name helps in terms of the narrative, media, and so on.
Konstantin Kilimnik was another one that they went after.
Yeah, exactly. If they get him to plead on some kind of, they don't really care. I mean, I'm sure they're happy just to let him go as long as he pleads guilty, because then they have that label that they can hold out. I think if that happens, then the narrative is entrenched, and then it is RussiaGate 2.0, because then it's, well, this Russian guy who lied about Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, and he was fed information by Russian intelligence. That's obviously, if you go out in the media, that's the narrative right now. And that's not going to change if this guy pleads guilty. It's only going to get worse. Yes. So that's option one. Option two is it goes to trial, and then the whole thing is going to blow up because Wise doesn't really have a case.
Right. But you also, I note in one of your tweets, you said something like, to the Republicans, you're playing defense, you should play offense. And I think, what did you mean by that? That essentially that the case against Biden isn't dependent upon this, or that it's on this memo, this FBI memo that was written in 2020. Is that what you meant? Go on the don't play defense on this.
No, that too, but in that specific tweet, it was about this Russian, the Republicans, always the same problem. They always buy into the other side's narrative, and then they go on defense. So the narrative they bought in on that tweet was, yeah, maybe this guy Smirnov was spreading Russian disinformation, but it doesn't matter because we already know about this and that and the money laundering and blah, blah, blah. So this was like the defensive position. And my point was, yeah, we know all this stuff. By the way, Smirnov, that came out in 2023. The entire Biden story existed in great detail, the Biden corruption story, long before that. So we didn't need Smirnov. But so they're right in that way. But they're wrong to accept this Russian disinformation narrative that the media and the Democrats have been pushing out. Because, as we just discussed in great detail, not even David Wise is making that point. No one's that's just completely invented. The Russian disinformation thing has been invented. At least in RussiaGate 1.0, you had Steele out there who was saying there was collusion and there was this and that. Here we have no one saying it. Smirnov's not saying it. Wise is not saying it. So the only people who are saying it are Democrats and the media who just made it up. So Republicans just don't buy into the false narrative. The first thing you do is, no, there is no Russian disinformation. There's no evidence for Russian disinformation. And then move on to your next point.
Right. That's all they need is that headline in the New York Times, and we're off to the races.
Right,
yeah.
And they got it.
But anyway, I mean, obviously the issue of the Trump legal battles, I mean, it's a vast subject. We don't have time to talk about that, but maybe we can talk about at least the trial that's now coming up next month, the one in New York. So Singer, the Manhattan DA, he gets first dibs at Trump as a criminal trial. As everybody knows, this is a peculiar case. Trump paid off. It's got essentially a legal expense, and he settled a nuisance suit with this porn star. Classified this as a legal expense, but the Manhattan DA says, "Oh no, this wasn't a legal expense. This was an election contribution, and so therefore he's a violation of federal election law, and it's a felony. So he's bringing a felony charge in a state court for a violation of federal law, but somehow he's getting first dibs. But this is in Manhattan." where again 90% of Manhattanites hate Trump. So what do you think is going to happen at this trial?
Well, I think after the Mark Stein trial the other week, where a jury found Mark Stein liable for something, I don't mean to digress here, just to show my own kind of thought process, development here. Anything's possible, because that trial was the biggest slam dunk I've ever seen in terms of you got to throw it out. It should have never been a trial, because
could you just explain quickly for anyone who's not fully on board exactly what happened at the Mark Stein trial?
Yeah, so Mark Stein was found liable for having defamed this climate scientist called Michael Mann, and Michael Mann is the hockey stick guy who says that, you know, it is this hockey stick where everything is getting super hot, and Mark Stein had called, just very short, had called the hockey stick a fraud. And so now a DC jury told Mark Stein to pay Michael Mann $1 million. Now, everything else aside, there's a legal standard in defamation law. And the legal standard is that you are only liable if you did not believe what you said. That's it. That's the legal standard. Now, there is no way on earth, I mean, I know Mark Stein a little bit. There's just no way on earth that Mark Stein secretly believes that the hockey stick is real. That's just not a thing. It's just impossible. It's logically and in every other way impossible. So that it was just so obvious. And yet the jury came back around $1 million. So what I'm saying is that things are so bad in terms of these jury pools, which are totally tainted in various cities and various places, that you just don't know. So I agree with you. This could go bad for Trump. Now, I do wish he had better lawyers. When we just talked about Smirnov, I'm just so impressed with Smirnov's legal team. Everything they put out is just fantastic. Then they also put out the transcript that they had in the Las Vegas court, talking to the judge about releasing him or not releasing him. And Smirnov's lawyers were just running circles around these DOJ lawyers. I mean, they were just, you know, when you come across these, I used to work in a very top law firm, and I was just a kind of a very junior guy. And there were a couple of people in there were absolute killers. I'll just, you know, they will always stick in your mind. And we know they're not many, but there are a few in the legal kind of profession. They are just incredible. And Trump doesn't have them, and Smirnov appears to have them.
Yeah, Trump needs some of those lawyers from that TV series Billions. Okay. So,
yeah. Well, or maybe just get Smirnov's lawyers. I'm just so impressed with those guys. But you just need. There's another one, Eric Dubalier, who I know a little bit. He was the guy who represented Concord, RussiaGate 1.0. Concord was, of course, the company that was accused of Putin's cook, the guy who sadly passed away. Yeah. Concord was accused of, buying these internet ads, just absolute trash, right? And Robert Mueller brought these charges because he thought, well, the Russian company will never show up here. They will never defend this. And Concord showed up, and their lawyer was this guy called Eric Dubalier. Just another one of those killers. Fantastic. So coming back to New York, it was the first case. It was at the time, I thought, oh my God, this is beyond laughable. But I have to say, some of the subsequent cases are even more laughable. Right. So, because at least in this case, well, there was a Stormy Daniels, and she did get some money. And so at least we have that kind of sliver of something, whereas in these other cases, there's nothing. So, you're right. The problem, of course, as you mentioned, is why is a Manhattan district attorney enforcing federal election law? And this is where you need those killer lawyers. Even if, let's say that you forget about Manhattan, forget about the jury, the tainted jury pool and whatever, you can cause so much havoc with a good lawyer at this stage, at the trial stage, where this thing gets thrown out right away on appeal because of gazillions of errors of law, errors of this and errors of that. So, this is what should happen here. By the way, that was a mistake that was made in the previous trial, in the Letitia James trial, where Trump has just been his company's been fined. What was it,
355 million? Yeah.
During the trial, they did not do what I just mentioned, where you just throw spanners into the works the whole time. Not because the judge is going to agree with you. This judge back in that 380 million case, it was terrible. We all know that. but you just throw it into the works because then you have a record that you can appeal on. And, there was very little of that, or any that I saw.
Right, right. But that's the same thing with the other guy. I think, what's his name, Kaplan, the one who presided over the E. Jean Carroll case.
Right.
I
Yeah.
mean, terrible judges. I mean, it's really, the American legal system is just a joke. I mean, you got these absolute clowns of judges. I mean, you think, they've got these very important positions and have enormous power, and they're clowns. They're just a political hacks. So, that's why one really doesn't have too much hope in this case. But what about maybe we can touch on the other cases. I mean, there's the DC case, which is now in abeyance while there is this appeal to the Supreme Court. What do you think is going to happen there?
We don't know. I mean, it's entirely possible that the Supreme Court will throw that out on some technicality. I think the one that's, and I know we talked about this on a previous show, the one that's always been like the only one that has actual substance is the Mar-a-Lago one.
Right.
And not because Trump wasn't allowed to keep documents or whatever, and we've been through this, but because he testified that he returned everything. And by everything, it was a clearly delineated category of things, documents marked classified, and he didn't return them. That's in essence the problem there, that happened. It doesn't matter whether he was allowed to have them. It doesn't matter. None of that matters. If you sign a document saying I returned those and you didn't, then that's going to be a problem for you. Would have been better. I remember we discussed this, last year, if he had just not signed that damn form or not complied, because there was nothing they could have done, but he did. And so that's going to be a problem. Now, Trump just submitted a bunch of filings in that case. For instance, why under the Presidential Records Act, he was entitled to all those documents and so on. I had a quick look at that. I thought it was actually pretty decent. And they got a pretty decent judge there in Eileen Cannon. And by the way, and they say, oh, she's a Trump judge or whatever. No, she's just a kind of a normal judge. That's how I see things now. There's either normal judges or far left judges. Those are kind of the only two categories that are left. So I thought the filings were very good. But as I mentioned, they don't address the main problem. The main problem is not whether he was allowed to have the documents or not. Even if he was allowed to have everything, even if everything was declassified, even if all those things are met, there's still that subpoena certification, which says, yes, I returned everything that's marked classified. And that was clearly not the case.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, again, we're going backwards, but I mean, was he told by his legal team that everything had been returned? I mean, maybe that doesn't count in the law, okay? But I mean, again, we all pretty much know who Donald Trump is, okay? For the way I read him, this is such trivial stuff that he's thinking about making sure he saves all the magazine covers that he was on during his presidency. So did he say, are we good to go? Yep, we're good to go. We're good to go. Okay. I mean, does that mean anything in the legal world?
Well, the problem, first of all, I completely agree with you. One of the filings, pretty recent, had some more detail on the stuff that he kept. A letter from Kim, Barack Obama's letter for the handover. I mean, you're absolutely right. These are memorabilia
souvenirs.
Items. That's what he wanted. Souvenirs. The problem is that he could say, yeah, no, I don't know anything. I mean, the lawyers were taking care of the search thing. They said everything was returned, got nothing to do with me. But then we have this problem of allegedly this guy Nauta, the valet, being told by Trump to ferry a bunch of boxes that Trump wanted to Trump's kind of personal residence, which is where they later found some of these documents. Can they prove that this was Trump or not? I don't think they can. And, will Nauta throw Trump under the bus? I mean, there's a lot of kind of variables there. But, that is the only actual legal problem he has. If we were in a normal world, in a sane world where we're talking about law as it used to be.
Yeah, but if we were in a normal world, this would never come up. No president has been given this kind of scrutiny. I mean, as far as I know, Barack Obama said, they're my files.
Of course, and
go pound sand. Okay, they're mine.
Well, Clinton took all the China, didn't he?
Yeah. That's right. But let's say, what you said, he's found guilty of I don't know, in this case, what they making false statements about having returned documents and not having returned them. What's the punishment? What does that mean? I mean, is that a felony? And then does that carry a prison term? And what's the punishment for not complying with a subpoena?
Because there's no precedent for a president.
Right.
Right, but I don't think the punishment will be treated on that basis. I mean, first of all, he'll never ever go to jail because of all this Secret Service and all. You know, you can't. So the worst that could ever happen to him is house arrest. But I don't. And as a practical matter, I don't think it will ever get there. Even someone like Joe Biden or Kamala or whatever, who knows what's going to happen in 2024, 25, and so on, would, as a last minute kind of thing, you know, national healing, pardon him if that were to happen.
Why would they do that? You say that they would do it. Why would they do that? They don't like Trump. Why would they give him a pardon?
Well, say if he loses in 2024,
it would make them look very good, George.
Well, yeah, but also, what do they care? They hate him so much. Do they really care about?
No, I think Hans is right. National healing and all, and he's done. He's done.
If he's done, of course, if he wins in 2024, everything's then he can pardon himself. So he's not going to go to jail. I'm very, very confident of that. It's not
just go back. You're confident even if it happens in D.C. If he's found guilty in D.C. by that Tanya Chutkan, he won't go to jail.
Yeah, I'm confident. Yeah.
Okay.
Because of the reasons we just discussed. So first of all, house arrest, but even that's not going to happen.
Yeah, but George, at this stage, all they want is conviction. That's what they want. Okay.
Yeah. A convicted. Nixon was pardoned. That only helped him in his personal freedom, being able to go to the shop or whatever, but it didn't help him with his image. Probably went the other way. It probably harmed his image.
Yeah, because he accepted the pardon. Yes.
Yeah. Right, but let's say, but I'm just thinking, Tanya Chutkan, let's say the trial takes place in D.C. It concludes around about September, October. He's found guilty of all these serious offenses. And what does Tanya Chutkan do? I mean, she's again a political apparatchik. Is she really going to say, okay, well, you can be released, pending your appeal, or is going to say, this is a crucial moment before the election, 1 or 2 months. Hey, you're going to jail. Prior to the election, that prevents you from campaigning.
Well, there's a long period, even in just any standard case, between a conviction and actually going to jail, because then once you're convicted, then you have to go through all the assessments and so on about jail time, and so that's a whole separate process. So no matter what happens, let's say he gets convicted, it's still going to be many, many, many months until we even get to the point of possibly going to jail. So they're not going to beat the November 5th, 2024. They're not going to beat election day, whatever they do. And as I said, I'm absolutely confident that whoever wins, he's going to get pardoned after that anyway. I mean, the whole thing is just this is not about law enforcement. This is just a political ploy. Every one of these cases, everything is. And if he loses, I think they will just rub it in, like, yeah, okay, have your pardon, you're a double loser, and just kind of go away. If he wins, oh my goodness, then we're in for some real fighting.
But then the other thing is that if he wins, now he can pardon himself on the federal things.
Right.
But then the question is, can he pardon himself on the state cases? Now, everyone says, no, he can't do that. He can only pardon himself on federal things. But there is a federal supremacy clause. So if you can pardon yourself for federal cases, I don't know why you can't pardon yourself also for state cases, because there is federal supremacy. I mean, federal courts are higher than state courts.
Would that, given George's scenario, would the Supreme Court have to decide that? Because, again, we're in uncharted territory. I mean, this has never happened before.
No, that is correct, but there's no there's no conflict. I mean, the supremacy comes in if there's a conflict, and unless you can invoke something federal on the so, for instance, Jeff Clark is trying to do that in Georgia, where he's trying to say, no, these are not Georgia charges; these are federal charges. To make it federal. So no, but the bottom line is you cannot pardon himself in a state case. Now, the New York cases are about fines, so that's just about money. The one in
Georgia
is falling apart. So I don't think he's got that much to worry about on the state side.
Well, going to the New York case about the humongous fine that was given, does he have is there an appeal process for him? I mean, that's not a done deal, is it?
No, it's not a done deal. But, as I mentioned earlier, I just didn't think the lawyers did a good job in terms of establishing a record for appeal. You can't just say, oh, I disagree with the judge or the judge is bad. That doesn't work. You have to have you have to point out particular rulings during the trial. Say, well, the judge got that issue of law wrong, he got that wrong, and so on. In order to do that, you got to object. You got to put in filings. You got to do all kinds of things.
I have this impression, I'm not a lawyer, but I just get this gut feeling that his legal team doesn't have the heart. They don't have their heart in it. We talked about this so many times.
Now, what I heard, I agree, well, I don't know about heart, but certainly caliber is an issue I would certainly flag up. When I don't know this for a fact, but I've been reading and from different sources that they did not have an appeal ready during the trial for the fine case in New York because they were looking for appeal lawyers after the case. If that's true, that's a really, really bad sign because you want the appellate lawyer there at the trial stage in order to help you with what we were just talking about, setting all these traps along the way. And being ready to go once the verdict comes in, and if it's a bad verdict. If it's true that they didn't have one, that's unforgivable. Now, Peter, I just think they're just not very competent. I mean, Alina is a lovely lady, Alina Haba, but I'm sure she's a lovely lady. I don't know her.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, I'll be strung up for saying this, but I mean, she looks very pretty sitting next to the president, but that's the best thing I can say about her.
Right. Well, that's true.
I mean, if apparently he met her at his golf club because she has her she has her office around there in Bedminster. The likelihood that you will find one of these killer lawyers just happen, run into them in your golf club one afternoon, is pretty low. I mean, you because there aren't many of them, so you have to go and find them wherever they are and not wait for them to come to your golf club, by chance. And so I don't think she is one of those killer lawyers.
I'm surprised. Well, I have to say, I didn't realize that once you get this huge judgment, you kind of have to come up with a lot of money right away. Because I always thought, okay, well, maybe you come up with 10% and then you do your appeal. But no, in order to file your appeal, you actually have to come up with an awful lot of money immediately.
I didn't know that. George, do you know how much?
Well, I mean, it's an enormous sum of money. I mean, I think in order to just to get a bond, I mean, either you come up with the whole sum or you get a bond, which itself is a lot of money, and then to the bonding company, then they want an awful lot of collateral and everything. So, and that has to be done pretty quickly. So it just surprised me just what pressure he's now under in order to come up with this money.
Right, and he's not going to have that money sitting around. I mean, it's all sitting in various properties. The funny thing is, I saw somewhere that someone valued a more realistic valuation of Mar-a-Lago is about 380 million, which corresponds to the fine. So someone suggested, why don't you put up Mar-a-Lago as collateral?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's that's good. Well, Hans, this has been again, fascinating conversation. A lot to chew on, and it's so good to have with us somebody who follows all the minutiae. We follow the minutiae, but nowhere near to the extent that you do. So we're very grateful that you've helped us out here. So thank you, Hans, and look forward to having you back soon, maybe in March. At the time of the start of the New York case. So,
sure, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. All the best. Bye-bye.